Cool. Let's get things started. Welcome everyone to another episode of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross-Project Council meeting. Today is the last day of March in the year 2020. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy and physically distancing, but remaining socially connected. Let's see. My first question is about announcements, and Jory's running a little late, so maybe when she chimes in, if she has any announcements, she can share then. Does anybody else have any announcements that they want to share?
This is Robin. Hi. Just kind of the same message from last week on OpenJS World. That we are still looking to make a go, no-go decision in early May. So don't buy plane tickets, but content is on track. So if it does become a virtual event, which is likely, we are on track for content. So our speakers are being notified for some of the CFP submissions. Our keynote invitations are pretty much on track. So please just watch for updates on the event page as well on the COVID-19.
Great. Thanks for the update. I think it's safe to say that the Collaborator Summit is, will follow suit.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we're making plans on that side of things to see how much we can do virtually and try to put together a collaborator summit in a virtual fashion, which is, I don't think, ever been done before. In fact, I think we usually even have trouble just roping folks in virtually in the in-person sessions, but I feel pretty confident that we'll figure out some.
That's right. So Jory sent out an email. Jory sent an email out this morning to all of the project leads. So please give your feedback on the Collab Summit GitHub site, and we're looking at shaping that content as well with all of you.
That's right.
The biggest challenge, I think, is going to be around time zones. We've been discussing like next 10 years of Node on the Node TSC and collaborator side, and that seems to be like, for a digital conference where you can do some recordings, you might get around that. For a collaborator summit, the biggest challenge, I think, just to get people thinking, is how do you cover the time zones? Because usually one of the benefits you get from people being in person is that at least we're all in the same time zone.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. And if we do a virtual event for OpenJS World, we're going to stay with the Austin time zone. So that's definitely a good thing to consider as well. I think just the cultural aspect of trying to replicate that, hallway track is important too. Jory has organized a holodeck meetup on Fridays. We had our first one this last Friday, which was cool. Just with no agenda, just getting to know each other better, just playing around with this platform, although our event team is exploring a lot of cool different platforms and narrowing down the choices as well. So.
Great. Oh, and I see Jory is on.
Yes, hi. It sounds
Yay.
like you all covered, what I would have wanted to share in the announcement section, and I'm just looking forward to hopefully seeing everybody on Friday at Holodeck, and then also getting everyone's feedback on Collab Summit. So thank you.
Thanks, Jory.
Yeah, thank you, Jory. Is there anything else that we want to highlight potentially happening tomorrow?
Yes, there is. There is. If you have ever wanted to say hello or get to know the wonderful Node TSC, we are doing an AMA on our social media channels tomorrow, where you can dial in or listen on YouTube and ask the Node TSC reps anything. You can submit those questions now or later via Twitter or via our Google form, which I'm sure we will tweet out later. But these are super fun, and really looking forward to hanging with our Node TSC reps tomorrow.
Great. Yeah, the technical steering committee. Do we know who's going to be on there? Michael, do you have input there?
I do, but I don't have the list off the top of my head.
Okay.
Beth is one, I know. I think Mateo, you, Michael, obviously.
Yep.
I think
Garish
Anna.
is on as well.
Rachel, excuse me. We also have Colin. Garish is going to be joining us. Gabriel is going to be with us. And then I think Miles has tentatively accepted. And I think that's everybody. We've been tweeting it out pretty regularly, so I'm pretty familiar. Just making sure. Yep, that's everybody that has decided to participate. So it should be a really, really great one.
Great. Excellent. Cool. I think that covers everything. I'll just give a quick shout out as well that Tiffany is sitting in today. She's from Tectonica, and she and Robin have been talking about things, as well as I think Miles and some other folks figuring out ways to work together. I don't know, do you want to just take a quick minute and introduce yourself, Tiffany?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Kwok, and I'm the partnerships manager at Tectonica. And we are a nonprofit organization that partners with tech companies to provide 6 months of free software engineering training, living childcare stipends and laptops, job placements to women and non-binary adults with low incomes, specifically in the Bay Area. We have an open source curriculum and we teach in full stack JavaScript. So I thought it'd be cool to chime in and seeing ways that we can collaborate.
That's great. Thank you, Tiffany. Yeah,
thanks for having me here, everyone.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, maybe we can learn more in one of the open office hours or something. You and I can touch base offline and see.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Cool. Anything else before we get into the agenda? Anything from the board? Is there a meeting later? No, that was last week.
The board was last Friday.
Yeah.
I don't have anything specific to bring back. I do know we have one board vote, which we've done through email. I haven't seen it close, but I think I've seen quite a few votes, so we should be able to close that one and then land the updates to the onboarding list and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't have anything other than that to report.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I dropped the Google Doc in the chat again, just as a reminder to folks to add yourselves there. It seems like we might be missing a few people. And as always, if anyone can help with taking notes in the minutes, that's always a great thing. Cool. So if we jump into the agenda then, the first issue is from the Summit repo around the travel fund questions. You know, we looked at this last week. Divi, who's on the call, put together a PR. And once we got kind of some of the stuff cleaned up that the linter introduced, you know, it's a pretty easy PR to digest. We've, if anybody wants to double back on it or take a first look and just make sure it looks good, we'll merge it pretty soon. That is pull request 492 in the cross project council, which I can drop a link to in the chat if anybody wants a quick view into that. Cool. Next on the agenda is voting members chosen by regular members. When I was updating the voting nominees, member nominees in another issue that we'll touch on in a minute, I noticed in our governance this clause here that up to 2 voting members may be nominated by the regular members. Once nominated, these members must be ratified by the CPC voting members before becoming a voting member. This is issue 504. I'm not sure how much there is to discuss here, but I wanted to make sure that people were aware of it, and I would imagine it is something that we should work through after we work through the voting members from the projects, non-impact projects.
What's our current count of non-voting regular members?
That is a good question. Let me see if I can quickly take a look. Regular members, it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, I think, if I counted that correctly. And it's important to note too that we currently have 5 voting members from non-impact projects, and that will drop down to 2. So I assume that 3 of those folks will probably go over to regular members and continue involvement.
For the minutes, how many? You said there's 11 regular members?
I believe so. Let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yep.
Yeah, I think the key question is like now the time we want to start doing that. It has been there from the beginning. We just, you know, prioritize doing the other things, getting our governance up and running.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea. We are I mean, effectively, what I feel like is that with the number of voting members we've had over the past year, things have gone decently well, and we are about to lose 3 voting members. So at the same time, adding 2 more via this other method does not sound like a bad idea.
I agree. Okay. Well, you know, feel free to add your comments in the issue, and we can kind of approach this topic as we wrap up on a couple of other voting activities. Does that sound fair?
Sounds good.
Cool. Great. All right. So if we move on, the next issue is 501 on the agenda. Brian opened this up, self-managed maintainer directory and groups.io mailing lists on lists.openjsf.org. I think Brian's on, right?
Yep,
there he is.
I'm here.
Great.
Yeah, so this is something I've been working on for a little bit here. And it's the output of a desire to have various groups be able to maintain their own mailing lists. It is possible to do that through groups.io. However, it requires me to promote you to be a moderator, and there's not a whole lot of transparency as to who is actually on the list except for the person who is the moderator. The overarching goal here is to remove myself from the critical path of things which the community should really, be able to do and manage by themselves. And mailing lists are a really good example, whether it's a list of maintainers or whether it's the folks who are on the code of conduct panel for a project, or if it's work groups like the standards working group. We want to make sure that this is easy for you to maintain without having to go through me. So what I put together here, this is an action, GitHub action that reads a config file in this directory, which called, or in this repo called directory. And then basically it syncs that YAML file against groups.io. And so anybody can open up a pull request. And when you open up a PR, then it goes through and it takes the information that you put in, builds a formatted directory out of it. When that PR gets merged to master, then those people get added or removed from the mailing lists. The other thing that this does, we've been discussing in general, how do we make sure that the CPC can communicate with the various project leaders? This also takes the maintainer lists and syncs them against a meta list, which I'm calling technical leadership right now. But the idea would be that if the CPC needs to go out and survey the maintainers of all the projects, or let people know that there's something coming up, or something like that, we'd have a relatively easy way to reach everybody. That is a moderated list. The goal is not to create traffic on that. We certainly don't want spam going across that. But it makes it easier for the CPC to reach out to its constituency, which would be the maintainers of the projects, or one of its constituencies. What we have right here is, if you go into the issue, one of the last comments that I posted has a link off to what we currently have for the CPC. Message format did kick the tires on this last week, so thanks to Emily for volunteering message format for that. We also have Express set up. The maintainers and the code of conduct list are set up in here. And then in the link, you can see what the CPC directory would look like. Michael had just posted a comment a few minutes ago about, maybe we should not include a link to people's emails, even though it has to be in the YAML file, obviously, to add to the mailing list. I can take that and push a change upstream that will that'll remove the email link. Otherwise, you can see that for each individual here, we have kind of as much information or as little information as they want to provide. There are some folks who I knew what their information was, and I
Brian,
checked them and
are
added
you
them.
sharing your screen?
Oh, no, I'm not. I probably should.
Yeah, it would make it, if you can, that would probably be even better.
I'm sitting here describing it. One moment.
I did just share the link in the chat as well.
Thank you. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So this is one of the things that comes out of this, is that we are able to create directories. And here's an example of what the cross-project council list would generate, as an automatic, this gets generated anytime that the config file is updated. We have a list of upfront of the various different links off to things that are important for the project. So off to the page that describes what the cross-project council is, the link to the mailing list, their calendar, our Slack, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, artwork, etc. And there are other things we can add there as well. It automatically builds a list of the current voting members, and in the file where all the stuff is configured, then there's a way to designate that somebody should appear in this list, as well as their terms. And then we get down into the members. Each member has their own profile. It's linkable. For example, here's Joe. Joe sent me his picture, so we have Joe's picture, as well as his role as CPC chair, and his current status as impact representative for Node.js, as well as who is participating on behalf of. Email, we'll get rid of that. Link to his GitHub profile, link to his Twitter, link to his LinkedIn. Now, all of this stuff is optional. It is possible to just have somebody have their name on here as well. But I figured while we're collecting information, or while we're publishing information that makes it easier to know who the folks are who are represented on these committees, if we want to add additional things like GitHub profiles, pronouns, etc., then this is a good place to do it. So that's a brief introduction to what this is. Does anybody have any questions?
I guess since you mentioned it, I'll just ask, does anybody else have any concerns over the email? Like, I'm not worried about my own, but I do know that's been, with bots scraping emails or whatever, so people might have some concerns.
It's a good question.
It's kind of like, if everybody else is like, yeah, it's fine, then I'm fine too. Just thought I'd mention it, that's all.
And I mean, it really is no problem for me to change that. As you'd mentioned in the issue, Michael,
It's all there anyway.
It's all there anyway in the YAML file. It's just how accessible is it?
Exactly.
So, yeah. Well, we can take it to the issue and we can discuss it there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. It sounds like there aren't any strong reactions anyway, so maybe just fine.
I'll need to look at the details and comment on this possibly later, whether there's any issues from the point of view of European Union privacy rights, for instance.
It's a good question.
So if this is unioning lists from each of the individual projects, do code of conduct people still have what they need to do their job? So if they needed to say, we need to make this a union except, for this name because there's an ongoing problem, can they do that?
So yeah, so let me maybe explain what the union does here. So the code of conduct lists themselves are not combined, right? So it's each list stays separate. It's just that there's one separate list, which is the union of all the lists, which you can reach everybody if you need to. So for example, if we have the CPC code of conduct
and
panels
that
on
list
here.
is a
separate.
small number of people.
Exactly. It would be separate and discrete. So for example, if we look here, Express established the code of conduct team. It has these 5 members on it. If you send an email to express-coc@lists.openjsf.org, it only goes to these people. So it functions like a typical mailing list. And if you were to look at the total number of lists that we have on the list.openjsf.org server, it's gone up by 32, one for each project. Plus, it'll probably go up by another 32, one for each code of conduct team for each project if they decide to use this. And each one of those is by itself. But then there's also this additional list called technical-leadership at list.openjsf.org, and that one is the union.
So my question was, thanks for explaining, and I'm afraid I may be a little confused because I think I'm not seeing your screen share. But my question was more about, is simple unioning the right sufficient for OpenJS Foundation's code of conduct people to maybe temporarily ban someone from a list? I don't know enough about how code of conduct things are handled to know whether that's something they need to be able to do, and just raise it as a potential concern.
Yeah, that's a good question. So if I could maybe try and restate it, I think is your question, if somebody is on the code of conduct panel and that person is subject of the code of conduct inquiry, what happens? Is that?
And my question isn't so much about the details of how code of conduct handles that. It's just, do they need to be able to, do they need a tool to be able to say, these things should be union except minus this small hand maintained system?
So so that's a good question. That's more of a mailing list question. Like how would we handle that? There's no support built into this for that specific scenario where you'd exclude somebody from a mailing list. And that comes back to the mailing list software that we're using.
Right. From my experience, like in the Node project, when we've been in that situation, we haven't used the mailing list. The challenge I see is, like, you don't want to exclude them completely from the mailing list necessarily, just from the messages that are related to that particular code of conduct discussion, right? So, I almost think you need a new mailing list or some way, or just send the individual list of emails minus that one.
So I think there's maybe 2 things to consider here. One is that if there was a situation like that, we actually have a mechanism to handle that. And for the individual projects, it would be to escalate up to the CPC, Code of Conduct Committee. And if the issue is that there's an individual who's on the CPC Code of Conduct Committee, then we have an escalation path up to that as well. So I think the answer here is not necessarily a technical one in terms of how do we handle the mailing lists themselves, but rather a policy one of how do you handle escalations in general.
I'm not quite sure I'd agree 100%. Like, in terms of, if we were in that situation for Node, the TSC ComCom could choose to take that report and try and handle it on their own before, like, just because it's reported against somebody on the TSC, we haven't said you have to escalate immediately to the COC. I think they could optionally do that. And I think the same would be for other projects. Like, they could try and handle it on their own, and the individual reporting could escalate it if they didn't think that was appropriate. But I don't think this is making the situation any worse than we had before, is where I'd go with it. We probably, we may not have solved for, do you need an easy way to spin up a new mailing list easily versus just using individual emails. But I don't think this particular part hurts or makes that better.
I would also suggest too is that one of the advantages of doing it this way, of having the list memberships be open and transparent, is that if you did feel a need to put together a list that, that didn't include one or more members, you have the information at hand to know who is receiving the email in the first place and what are the emails of the other people as well. So I mean, I'm not necessarily saying this would be the way to do this in the general case, but it does provide more information than we have today.
Fair enough. Thanks for explaining.
You're welcome.
I think it could be, worth exploring further in the issue if people don't feel like it's fully fleshed out. But it's probably good for us to move on to the next issue. But regardless, thank you, Brian, for putting this together. I think it's valuable. So let's figure out what we need to figure out.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I'm happy to set up other projects, or you can set up projects. Actually, that's the beauty of this. But if you do want to get one of your project's teams up and going on this, then just ping me and I can make sure that everything's configured the first time.
Is there instructions like how to set up your own mailing list?
Well, so that's the part where you need me. You need somebody who can configure the mailing list initially on the back end, and then add a specific user with specific permissions to allow this to control it. Once that's done, you don't need me ever again.
Right, but I'm just saying, like in Directory, do we have a, hey, I want to set up a new one, do this?
I can push some instructions for that.
I think that would be good, and then anybody who wants to follow one, create one themselves, could just follow those instructions. And part of it, obviously, is like email you to get the original mailing list backend part done. But
I can absolutely do that. I'll put it here on the front page.
Sounds perfect.
Great.
Excellent. Cool. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everyone. And again, feel free to check out the issue, to comment more and get to the links and everything. All right, right on. So moving on, the next item in the agenda is issue 488. This is around nominations for the 2021 voting CPC membership. I posted 6 days ago the list of CPC nominations and members from the impact level projects, which we have Node, Dojo, and jQuery so far. Excuse me, sorry. And then also the nominees for non-impact level projects, of which we have 6 here. And as I mentioned in the charter, it says that 2 members may be elected from non-impact projects. It doesn't say growth and at large. So when Toby nominated, I thought that was fair. Please, raise any concerns to me offline or in the issue if you want to discuss that further. And then 5 days ago, I made the request for folks who did nominate to create issues in the CPC repo with some of the information here in this comment, which I will share in the chat. So far,
is the issue with the list of people? Sorry.
The issue has the list of people. This is 488. I have a link in the chat. The people.
Okay, thanks.
So just for folks who are unable to jump to the link, for Node.js, Mateo and myself are continuing on as voting reps. For Dojo is Dylan is continuing on, Dylan Scheinman, if I'm saying that correctly. jQuery, Dave Methvin and Timothy Wilson are going to continue as well. And we still need, I think, a couple other projects to clarify their voting numbers, and I can work on that offline. But for the non-impact level projects, we have 6 nominees: Toby Langle from AMP, Anton Melita from WebHint, Nick O'Leary from Node-RED, Chris Hiller from Mocha, Chris Borchers from Architect, and Emily Aro from Message Format. And if I'm not mistaken, Emily and Chris both have their issues open. I've pinged a couple people directly to make sure that they get their issues opened as well. And we'll move forward on this soon. Any comments or questions? No? All right, cool.
Vote for me.
Well put. Great. So yeah, and also I'll encourage folks on the call and folks who maybe check this out later to go to the issues on the Cross Project Council and check out the folks who are nominated and have kind of put together their nomination issue. And we'll get voting going soon. I actually am not sure exactly when we do that. I don't know if Jory knows or anyone else. I'm trying to look it up while we're here.
And look, we have everybody's nominations in, and we have candidate statements. I would encourage everyone who hasn't done that yet to open their issue, because it would be great to open that ballot ASAP, given that our new term year starts literally tomorrow. So if we could try and be able to execute that by this week, by the end of this week, that would be super ideal. And
we just set a date for the vote to start open one way or the other.
Yes, and I would like us to maybe just consider using the polling feature in our list tool as the easiest way to do that, if that makes sense for everybody.
Polling feature in our list tool?
Yeah, Groups.io has a polling feature, so we can issue a poll out to the list and have people vote using that. That may be the easiest thing.
Anonymous?
Yes, anonymous to everyone. The moderator, I believe, can see the results as they come in.
Okay. I think that we've even used, like, on the node side, the few times we've used one where even the moderator can't see the result, like the individual votes, but I'm not sure if that makes a difference.
I'll go examine exactly how I'm pretty sure you can lock it down even further, but I think that's just the default behavior. I'll double check. It's just a very easy way to push that vote out to everybody very quickly. That was my thought.
Yeah, no, it sounds good if we got an easy way that covers the bases.
And so just to be clear, will we try to, when you say execute that, you mean we should try to get those issues open before next week's meeting, and say next week's meeting we begin voting and send out the poll?
Yeah, that would be great. It sounds like a fair timeline to me.
And I guess I'd say, like, the vote opens regardless. So if the people haven't opened their candidate statements,
screw them. Well, sorry.
It's more like that may have an impact on the vote, but like that's as long as we think we've given enough time, that's maybe okay, right?
Yeah. So
obviously, if they were elected anyway, then we would need the information before they could be confirmed. But
going forward, it might be a good idea to actually update the governance doc to include this explicit time limit. When does the vote actually happen? Because right now, I mean, we are now going to have the non-impact voting CPC members not have a voting member starting from tomorrow, given that we ended up starting this so relatively late. So in order to not have this happen again next year, we should know ahead of time and have confirmed actual numbers, like the 2 weeks we have for the nomination period, forcing us to have a specific timetable.
Yeah, documenting that would be good.
Would someone like to open an issue? Just kind of saying that real quickly.
I guess I kind of volunteered myself to do that.
Doesn't need to be in depth, just something that says we need to do this. And so just to clarify, I'm going to drop a comment into the nominations issue. We plan to start voting next week. We'll announce it or whatever at the meeting. And will we just leave it open for a week, or what's our thought here?
I do think we should time box it. just to ensure that for expediency, we get resolution and move quickly. So knowing that we are late, it would be great if we could time box this to a week or less.
Okay.
Like the total time to 1 week, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, what I'm thinking is maybe 1 hour short of 1 week, and that'll give me a moment to, or, you know, whoever to figure out who it is, and then we can announce it at the following meeting.
So 2 things. Do we have nominations of 2 voters for each of the non-impact projects known ahead of time? And if we do not, I would suggest that ASAP we get an email out saying that, hi, by next week, please nominate 2 voters, because the voting is going to open and be open for about a week. And, you know, these are the things you must do. And given that we've got all of these rules about how exactly the voting happens, and given that we have really so few actual voters possible in the whole system, would it be just easiest if we all just email Joe with whatever each individual wants to vote for, who's voting for a project?
Either way is fine with me. You know, I can take that, but whatever makes sense. I think if the system's not too hard, the polling feature, then let's just use that, and then it's kind of a system that can be verified later or whatever, if that would be.
But it's a good point that giving people like the people who are actually going to vote from the non-impact projects the heads up that says, you know, you need to identify your 2 voters, and the vote opens on this date.
So if I understand correctly, every project will have 2 votes, or, you know, can vote for 2 people, and that's what we need to clarify.
Non-impact projects. The rules in governance say that each non-impact project will nominate 2 voters through a process of their choosing. Each voter will be able to vote for as many or as few candidates as they wish. Those candidates who receive the greatest number of votes will be confirmed as the winners. In the case of a tie between 2 or more candidates, the winner will be chosen randomly unless there are only 2 candidates, or all but one of the candidates that are tied chooses to concede.
Okay. I'm glad we were clear about that.
Was it Michael that came up with this language?
I will not claim to have invented the whole thing, but I think I wrote it down based on, I think some of that comes from some of the other, existing voting methods and people's input. So
yeah,
I won't take credit nor
you won't take credit, but we'll still take you'll still take the blame.
Yeah, I guess I wrote it down. So yeah, sure, if you want to do that. And we're happy to change it if we think we should do something different.
Okay, so we have a little bit of work to do. I want to move on, because if we stop at 10 minutes of, we only have 5 minutes left here in this meeting. So I'm going to post a comment here. Our plan is to start voting next week, April 7th. Voting will remain open for 1 week. Elected voting members will be announced the following meeting, April 14th. But we need to get clarity on who will be voting for the non-impact projects. And we also need the voting members figured out from impact projects as well. Jory, can we work on that together and get that squared away?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, great. All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Okay, cool. So if I can try to hustle through some more of these issues. The next one is the WebHint project charter review. It looks like we have a number of approvals. So I just want to remind folks, if they're on the call, if they can jump into this issue here and take a quick look. Shouldn't take too much of your time. And Darcy, I'm seeing your comment here. Voting is open to voting members and 2 people from each non-impact project, and this is for the voting representatives for non-impact projects, of which there can be 2. If anybody needs any. Okay, great. Thanks, Darcy. Cool. Jumping over to the next issue is the OpenJS Collaboration Network. Michael, do you have any updates here? Anything you want to share?
Very quick update. Just so far I've only seen positive feedback. Somebody did mention to me the CNCF SIGs, which are special interest groups. So I want to spend a little time going and reading up a bit on them. But that's all I've got for this week.
Cool. Thank you. Next issue is Populate the Code of Conduct panel. Do we have any progress here, or I see that Nina, is that's how you say her name from their name from the AMP project, said that they would like to help represent AMP on the COCP. And as I think we mentioned this last time, Jordan will be representing the Node.js project on the COCP. All right. There's nothing else there. I'll move along. The next item is pull request 414. This is for foundation-wide copyright governance. I know Toby has been looking to get some work on this. I'm trying to scroll to the bottom of this issue and see where we might be. It looks like I'm not sure there's been much over the last week. So I will move over that issue if there's nothing there. The next one is the post-graduation checklist. Michael, I see you typed that the board vote is underway and should be able to land soon, correct?
Yep.
Cool. Any news on the responsible security disclosures? Which
last week I took the action to follow up with Marseille, which I haven't done, so I'll try and do that this week in terms of nailing down some next steps and seeing how we move forward.
Great. And then the last issue on the agenda is chartering the standards team. This is, let's see, this is captured in PR 496 in the Cross Project Council. This adds the standards team to our documentation, along with a charter scope of responsibility. Yeah, pull request 496. You can see the copy in there. I encourage folks to take a look. I will drop
my understanding was that was simply waiting. We have a 14-day governance change waiting period.
Okay.
That I can see expires or has expired sometime today.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that could land very soon.
Great. Well, I dropped a link in if anybody wants to check it out, but we do have a ton of approvals, so that's great. Cool. So that wraps up our agenda. I will just really quickly drop a link. I appreciate Tiffany joining. There's a link to Tectonica in the chat if anybody wants to go learn more. We'll discuss that more in the future. And I think with that, we can call it a wrap and go to a private session for voting members, regular members. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Stay safe.
Thanks so much.
Yep. Cheers. Let's see. So as folks drop off, we can jump into a private session.
You want to drop the YouTube live?
Oh, that's probably a good idea.